trustees of McAllen Independent School District being held today, Thursday, July the 14th, 2016, at 11:30. The boardroom meeting is 2000 North 23rd Street here in McAllen, Texas. At this meeting, there will be discussion by the board on the item subjects listed as follows. And we'll be talking about, the board will be having conversations with MGT regarding the McAllen Independent School District maintenance, facility maintenance and operations comprehensive audit. Dr. Barrera.
Yes, sir, and welcome back, everybody, from the break. Congratulations to Dr. Gonzalez. And so we have with us today the results of the audit from our MGT of America Consulting Group. We have two representatives here, and I'm happy to turn the podium over to them so that they can relay the report.
Before we do so, I failed to mention or introduce Dr. Gonzalez, who will probably provide us some insight as to where we are, and if we could do that before we start.
Perfect.
Dr. Gonzalez.
Well, I do want to thank the company for their efforts. MGT did put a lot of energy into looking at our facilities to give us some feedback on direction and give us some advice on what they believe we could do from that standpoint to ensure that we're running efficiently. So thank you all for the energy that you put in, and we look forward to the report so that we can, from a business standpoint, make some decisions that are going to move our district in the right directions. So thank you all for that.
Welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. We really appreciate it. So I'm Susan Zoller. I actually led this project. Here with me is Dr. Ed Humble. Ed is the Vice President in charge of the Education Division for MGT. I have the PK-12 portion of the MGT Education Group, and we work all across the country. And as I said, I appreciate this opportunity to be here in McAllen and to look at your facilities and how well they're supporting the educational program that you're trying to put in place here. We firmly believe that what's most important is your educational program, and our goal is to give you facilities that will support those efforts to be effective and efficient so that you can move dollars, if possible, into the instructional side of the house rather than using dollars that may be more useful in that regard. So we were here about a month ago and gave you some information about your schools and about the data that we have gathered from those assessments that we did at your school sites. I want to do a brief review of that data just to kind of get you back into it. I don't know about you, but a month away from the data, my head begins to go, well, what did they say about that school? So our goal is to just do a very brief review of what we had shared with you last time, and then really to get into the options. When we were here last time, you asked us to come back not with answers yet, but with options. So we have developed an array of options for elementary, middle school, and high school. Ed will talk a lot about how we develop those and what we think of those, but really they are not the final decision. They are options that we want to share with you today, and from that we would, I hope to say, what do we think we need to do next? How soon do you want the final report? What is that? How is that going to best meet your needs? Just as Dr. Gonzalez said, our goal is to help you decide what to do next by giving you this robust data and building on some of the options that we've identified, but making sure that you have information that can really be helpful and useful to you. So one of the things that we talked about last time is what we call cut points. These are arbitrary, they're not capricious, but they're arbitrary. We have identified these as possible places to say this school is in the good band, and we've shown that as green, right? Or this school is in a good, difficult band, and we show that as yellow. It's kind of a stoplight.
Can we have a quorum?
On a workshop, we can.
Okay.
But thanks for pointing that out.
Thank you. I
Yes.
appreciate that. So we show that as a yellow band, schools that are not where we'd want them to be. And then we do have some schools shown in the red that are definitely ones we have to take a look at because the data that we've gathered suggests that they are in need of some help. We also show some schools that are in the good and the excellent band, and those are in the group of data that we call the combined score. Just as a reminder, the combined score consists of 4 assessments that we did. We had an architect, engineer type walk each building with your custodian and maintenance folks and look at the condition of the building. So they'd have gotten on the roof, they'd have looked at the windows, they'd have looked at the flooring, they'd have looked at the plumbing and the heating and all of those systems. That was one score. The second score that they did is called a site score. Again, they looked at the condition of the pavement, the sidewalks, the parking lots, the lighting outside to make sure they were in good condition. The other 2 scores were done by somebody like me with an extensive educational background. So I walked the building with the building principal. I looked at the building from an instructional perspective and looked at the educational adequacy. And I also looked at technology readiness. And since our last meeting, Mr. Trevino has given us some information about your plans to upgrade your technology. So we're factoring that into that. Our 4 assessments were combined, and we created what we call, you see on the screen, a combined score. Any school that scored higher than 90 is considered excellent or like new in terms of its condition. Any school that's less than 59.99 is considered unsatisfactory. So those are the cut points that we worked on with Mr. Trevino and Dr. Gonzalez a month and a half ago and brought to you when we were here last. We're going to want you to say, yep, those work, or no, we want to make some minor adjustments to those before we finish today. The bottom half of this cut points is what we call the utilization data. It's really important that you have schools operating efficiently. And a school that's operating efficiently tends to have about 80 to 90% occupancy. It doesn't have lots of classrooms that are sitting empty. It also doesn't have lots of portables out there because we don't want kids in portables. We want kids in a permanent building, in a safe area with access to all of the spaces that they need. So those 2 outliers you can see are labeled red. Inadequate, you don't have enough space, that's over 100% utilization. You have some buildings like that. Inefficient, buildings that have less than 70% occupancy. You also have some buildings like that. So again, these numbers are arbitrary but not capricious. They are what we have used in some other places, modified after conversations with Dr. Gonzalez and Mr. Trevino to address some of the issues here in McAllen. That's the first piece. Let me show you and remind you the data that we brought back to you a month ago. This is each of your elementary schools. You can see the combined score, and the 40, 40, 10, 10 that's underneath that title means that we put 40% weight on the condition of the building. Remember the windows, the doors, all of those physical systems? We put 40% of the weight on the educational adequacy that I did. We put 10% on the site condition and 10% on technology readiness. Those numbers can be changed if you ask us to do so. We can make adjustments in those as well to create that combined score. As you can see at your elementary schools, Alvarez at your elementary has a score of 67.45, putting it in that yellow band that I had just described. You also have some buildings that are in that blue band that are in really good shape, and you should feel really good about that. You have no elementary schools with a combined score that is in the red band at all. You should feel really good about the efforts of your district and your maintenance department to keep buildings in good shape. The PK-12 capacity column is a number that we developed based on an instructional model that we used. We identified how many children you can put in what types of rooms. For example, most special education life skills classes, you only want 7 or 8 kids. You don't want 30 in there. Whereas a PE class, You could put 30 in there, right? So we used your number of rooms in each building to develop a capacity number for that building based on the program that you have today. If I'm a building principal, I can change that capacity if I change from a third grade classroom to a special ed classroom, right? But those are the numbers that we have today. That's how many students we think should be your maximum capacity in that building based on the program that you're operating there. Well, the last column shows the projected utilization out in 2022. We got data from your district enrollment specialist who gave us the projection for out that far. How many students do we think we're going to have in each building in 2022? That's the number that's shown there. And you can see you have wide variation across the elementary schools. You have Gonzales at 176%. That's in the red. That building is way overcrowded based on the criteria that I've laid out for you here. You also have Milam at 117%. Conversely, you have Escandón that is expected to be at 35%. So Escandón is operating in a inefficient model, but so is Gonzales under these data. And I just realized that Escandón should be in red there. I neglected to change my color scheme here.
Oh, no charge in the audit. Saved us a couple bucks, wrong information.
Sorry, I'll get that fixed for next time. All right, let's look at the same information for your middle and high schools. Oops, sorry, sure.
Yeah, if we could go back.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions on what you're seeing on this chart? I kind of have one. Bonham is at 48. And then where's Roosevelt? 58.
58.
And then Escandón you already showed us, and there's a Sam Houston.
Houston's actually in pretty good shape. Houston, we're showing at 92%.
Okay.
It's in
The
that
reason I
same
bring up
neighborhood.
those four
Yeah, it's in the
schools,
same
are
neighborhood.
literally, they're lined up.
They are.
They're right there.
They're right there. I mean, you could go there or there,
We're gonna-
and the distance
yeah.
is the same.
We're gonna talk about
We're gonna
that.
talk
Okay.
about that in today's options. We're gonna talk about that.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But we wanted to go back and revisit this data, just to
Yeah.
kind of remind you all what we had showed you last time. So, okay, to move to middle school and high
Yes.
school? All right, so same three columns, same combined score column, PK-12 capacity column, and projected utilization. And here you can see there are more schools on this list that are over-enrolled. That would include Fossum Middle School, Morris Middle School, McAllen High, and Memorial High. And I'm doubtful that any of this is a huge surprise, but it is, at least for me, it's helpful to put it all in one place so that we can see it and get our hands kind of wrapped around the data.
I'm surprised with Travis, given where Travis has been the last few years, it was still at 88%.
But that's projected,
Oh, projected, it's
right? That's projected
2022.
2022.
Gotcha.
So even Travis, that's way up north there where the growth is happening, we show there's some capacity there. And that's great, you need capacity.
Actually, Travis is south.
No, Travis is down here.
Yeah.
Travis is right.
Oh, I was
No, no.
thinking-
On Houston Street.
You were thinking of Fossum.
I was thinking of.
There's Morris and Fossum
yeah,
up north.
I was
Yeah,
thinking.
Morris is way up
Yeah.
there. You're right.
Morris is
On Main.
Morris is
Yep.
one of our.
You're right, Travis is down here.
Morris is one that's kept me up at night. Gonzales has kept me up at night. And believe it or not, Bonham has kept me up at night.
Okay, so that's sort of the background data. There is lots of information behind each of the numbers that's here, and when we give you the report for each one of those four assessments that I described, there's a separate report that says Brown Middle School has a score of X for the condition of the building, and these are the 5 systems in that building that are causing that score. So there's lots and lots of data, very specific about that building that you'll have when we get you the final report. But we wanted to give you this summary and this reminder. The only other thing I would point out on this chart, remember Achieve Early High School? If you look at its combined score is 43.7, which is the lowest score of all the schools in the district. When we did that assessment, we based the educational suitability on the 14 portable buildings that house Achieve. We don't score portable buildings very well because, again, we don't want children in portables. When we went back and looked at the fact that the Achieve kids also attend class in college classrooms and spend a great deal of their day there, we rescored it. So the 66.03 we think is a more accurate picture of the kind of environment that those kids are actually in. We don't want to suggest that you have a school that is unsatisfactory. You have a wonderful program that exists at that site and really a wonderful opportunity for kids. So we scored it both ways and wanted to highlight that here.
We still want to make some recommendations about where to house that program, but yeah, it shouldn't be as low as 43 because of the unique circumstances.
Now,
So,
excuse me.
go ahead.
Did you factor into the equation the fact that they have access to a state-of-the-art facility across the street, which is STC? So was that kind of factored in? Because a lot of their classes are actually...
That is exactly the difference between the 43 and the 66, because it isn't even off across the street, it's right next door. And most of their day is spent in those college classrooms. So it didn't seem fair for us to be suggesting that Achieve was unsatisfactory when, yeah, they're in those kind of crummy old portables, but really they're in that beautiful college campus environment. So that's why we adjusted the score like that. Thanks for that question. So when we were here last, you as board members asked us to come back with options. You didn't want final answers, you asked us to come back with options. And what you asked us to do was to think about how some of these issues could be solved first by doing some rezoning. It's always a touchy issue in districts, but rezoning seems like a good place for us to start. So we're going to give you some options that deal with that. After that, you asked us to think about how much improvement do we want? Do we want to bring our schools, all of them, up to 80% across the board? Would the community feel good about bringing all of the schools up to 80%? Remember these scores, these combined scores? Would the community feel okay if all of those scores got raised to 80 across the board? 80 for condition, 80 for suitability, technology readiness, and so forth. Or do they need to come to 90? Because that significantly alters the cost. If we're bringing schools to an 80% target, then the cost will be this. If we're bringing schools to a 90% target, the cost will be higher. So we have developed options that we're going to give you now that looked first at rezoning, second came back and said, okay, what happens if we move to 80%? Third, what happens if we go to 90%? And then you had asked us to consider some repurposing options. Do we need all the schools that we have? Are they ones that we should be keeping if they didn't score very well, and so forth? So Ed's going to walk us through the options that we've been working on.
I want to go back to just a little bit about what the 80s and 90s. Bringing schools up to a score of 80. The definition of 80 is that school's in good condition. So that means it's in good condition. Definition of 90 is it's in a like-new condition. Okay, it has to score 100. It has to be less than 3 years old. So we never bring schools up to 100 because it means we're replacing all of them. But it means an as new condition. So it means if the mechanical systems are poor, it's really bringing it up to an as new condition. So you're going to replace a lot of those kinds of things. So bringing it up to 90 is significantly more expensive than bringing it up to 80. 80 still gets you a building that all of us would be pleased to have our kids in. Okay, we'd all be pleased to send our kids to a building that scores 80, okay? And so there's kind of the difference in that because the numbers will look different. Susan, because I asked her not to go to the next screen yet because I want to talk a little bit before because the next screen is going to start laying out what you need to do. And the first one, and here's where I say sometimes I sit there and scratch my head and lose sleep over these things. You asked us to first consider how could we do this through rezoning, because it looks like you can. It looks like you've got, when you look at the total, you have enough capacity in this district. When you look school by school, you've got Escondón at 35, and you've got Gonzales at 170-some%. We just got to start moving kids around and moving boundaries around. you know how that, and you know, and I know because I do this for a living. That's always easier to say than to do, because you start moving boundaries of elementary schools, you start messing up feeder patterns to middle schools and high schools, and you start crossing roads you might not want to cross. You know, I have this map emblazoned in my head right now because McAllen coming to this meeting and this is kind of a key place where we lay this out for you. And so you've done a fairly good, there's some exceptions, and you know there's a fairly good job on the elementary boundaries of, you know, not having them cross these major thoroughfares. And so it's clear to me that you've tried to do that, and I applaud you for that. Of course, we all would want to do that, okay? So when I lay this out, I'm going to give you option 1. And I'm going to do all elementary schools first, and then middle, and then high. And option 1 for all 3 is the least cost option. Can we do this just by changing boundaries and moving students around, okay? So some of the things I'm going to show you, you're not going to like. Some of the things I'm going to show you, I don't like. We don't like. Okay, we don't like, okay? But here's how you could do this. It's really estimates at this time. Because like the first thing I'm going to say, and I promise,
Ready?
I'm going to say, you know, what you're going to see on line 3 of what's going to come up, it's going to say, what do we do about, because the schools are listed alphabetically, and it's going to say, what do we do about Castaneda? Am I saying that right?
Castaneda.
Castaneda.
Yeah. It's an Enya, the little school.
I know, and you know.
It's okay.
Us Yankees, it's hard. It's hard. I try. Susan does a really good job. Castaneda. Did I get it okay?
You did. Good.
All right, good. I'm glad. It's going to say to do a boundary adjustment and move approximately 200 students that are currently at Milam into Castaneda. Okay? I don't know exactly where that means then. We got to look at where the students are. But it means moving kids across a major thoroughfare. It does mean moving them across. But their boundaries touch, and so doing 200, I don't have the detail now of where exactly that boundary would be. But you're going to have to get approximately that many students because you're underutilized at Castaneda and you overcrowded at Milam. It's not that simple because Gonzalez comes into the picture too, and I'll explain that. So when you look at this, keep those things in mind, and this is option 1. We're going to follow option 1 with option 2, which I like a lot better. But, you know, it's a big surprise. Option 2 is going to cost more than option 1, okay? That's, you know.
Ready?
All right, I'm ready. So I'm going to walk you through these, okay? So the way this worked, I made some assumptions. On option 1, I said, we're going to go to 80. We're going to bring all the schools up to a score of 80. Okay, and if the school has a combined score of less than 70, then we're going to fix that. We're going to say that that's kind of arbitrary right now, but it's reasonable. It's reasonable. If a school has scores of less than 7, that's why we went out and did all these assessments. We're going to fix that. Okay, so Alvarez is a great one to start with. It has a combined score of 67. So what do we need to do with that? Well, we need to renovate it. And the results will be that building will have improved building condition, educational suitability, and improved site. Remember, the 4th assessment was technology readiness. Well, Alvarez on technology readiness scored over 70. Scored less than 70 on the other 3, had a combined score of 67, so we really don't need to do anything with the technology readiness if our cut point is 70. Making sense to you on how we calculated this? So it'll have those improvements, and the budget numbers that we calculate based on those scores, based on the individual score for each of the assessments, you need to put just over $2 million into that building to bring it up to scores, to bring it up to that condition of good. Okay. I also kind of arbitrarily said, if it's less than 60% utilized, it's really, really underutilized, and we need to really look at that. How can we repurpose it? What can we do? And so I put an asterisk by those because I'm going to get to those on a different chart, okay? So the second one was Bonham. It had a combined score of 74, over 70. So we're going to do regular maintenance. We're going to let Mr. Trevino just keep doing his thing. Where is he? There he is over there. Keep doing his thing and keep that building so that it doesn't deteriorate and make improvements on a regular maintenance kind of a thing. Okay? But I did put an asterisk by it because it's projected to be at 48% utilization. So how can we better utilize that building? And I'll get to that. Okay? Now comes the one that was tough, and I failed to say that even though the goal here was, can we do this by just changing boundaries? We were successful with two exceptions, one at the elementary and one at the middle schools with exceptions. And I'll explain that to you because I'm going to go ahead and go through the whole thing and how that works. For Castaneda, it's projected at 46%, and it is quite a ways north, but it's projected to be really underutilized. So there, I'm saying, do a boundary adjustment and move those to approximately 200 students that currently reside in Milam. That would end up with the utilization at Castaneda being 72%. Very good, very good. And it's going to reduce the number of students at Milam, okay? But it's not that simple. Go down to Gonzales, because this is almost a domino effect kind of a thing to make this work. Yes, sir.
Well, I know you're going to get to that, but I'm going to jump to it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think any of us here would move 200 students to move 200 more back into that school.
Yeah.
But in that repurposing of Gonzales, why wasn't Bettis Elementary factored in there? I think it would be an easier move for them to go from Gonzales to Bettis than it would be from Gonzales to Milo.
Because Perez is really at, it's right now,
96%.
it's at 96.
Bettis is?
Perez is at
Perez
90
is projected
and projected
to
to be at 96. So there really wasn't room to do that there. Yeah, that's the reason why.
That's the easy move.
It would have been an easier move to go to Perez, and I agree with that, okay? But it's projected to be at 96%. So we really didn't have any room to do that, okay? Now, if those are wrong, then we need to relook at those kinds of things, but that's the...
Is that right?
And the projections coming from looking at census data and the amount of kids coming through?
Looking at data from your own school district, staff person here who gave us the projection and told us the methodology that she uses in order to move those numbers forward.
Because right now, so right now, the way I understand, Bettis is under capacity.
Let's go back to the old... I have it with me.
And you guys are projecting out to 2020?
To 2022.
2022.
And the current at Perez it's currently at 75. So it does have some room right now. But we see that moving to 92, 96. Yeah, over the next 10 years. So all we would be doing is creating a problem down the road by adjusting that boundary, because that boundary is going to fill that school up on the data that we have.
But we
So that's
truly
the
understand your concern
Yeah.
about picking 200 kids up and moving them over here. And then
Oh, yeah,
picking up
it's
200.
not a good thing.
Anytime you move families is difficult.
It's a very difficult thing.
We understand.
We wanted to be able to answer your question on what this looks like. I want you to see what this looks like to do it all through boundary and the least possible cost, and that's what that looks like. You have to do that. It also means, but it's yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Ed. When we talk about student movement, you're looking at a geographic map.
Yeah.
And so the 200 is you're looking at the 200 closest to
Yes.
resolving a situation on a campus further south,
Yeah.
yet close proximity to where they live now because they border each other.
Of course.
And then another and I'm articulating what I'm thinking you're saying. And then another 200 that happen to be again bordering to, but in close proximity to the next closest school.
Right.
That's right.
And
That's right.
That's why you see a 200 to a
Right.
200.
Right.
That's how you're factoring.
It's how they factor in, and right now,
Right.
these are oversimplified because it's not that simple. There's going to be times when the ones that are closest to the school to move them to are also closest to the geographical location of the school you're moving them from, because sometimes just because of where the school is. So it's never this simple, and that's why I wanted to really say that up front. But this is the kind of thing we'll have to do to make that work, because we are so overcrowded at Gonzales, okay? All right.
If we solve the problem only by moving kids.
Right. Yeah, we saw this when we were out visiting communities down in the Balboa Acres and area down in Bonham, Escandona, is you had parents that you could see a school right across,
Yeah.
but yet
They were in a
their
different-
line ended up,
Yeah.
they were going to a school further away.
Yeah.
And they were wondering, could they have not gone to that one, they might have stayed, and they had left the district. So that's another element down the road we're going to have to be thinking about as well.
And it's true, and it's the reason you have, and it's clear, when I look at your boundaries, you've worked not to have that happen. You've tried to make it so that that doesn't happen. And I don't want to recommend doing that. I don't. But I do want to tell you, I do want this community to know what it would take to do this at the least possible cost. Okay?
Gotcha.
All right. So then I know that we have to break at 12, right?
Yes, sir.
Let me just do if you don't mind, I just want to finish the one, because it becomes a whole domino of thing with Castaneda, Milam, Gonzales, Rayburn, and Jackson, okay? So it becomes kind of a whole domino effect of moving students around. So at Gonzales, remember I said there were 2 exceptions. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it without putting a 100-student addition. Without adding a 100-student addition at Gonzales, just couldn't make this feasibly work. It's not very feasible anyways, but just couldn't make that work at all. So we put a 100-student addition there. Boundary adjustment, 200 to Rayburn from the north end of Gonzales, okay? 200 to Milam. So now you're going to say, well, just a minute, you just took 200 out of Milam. Yeah,
Right.
we did,
That's what
okay?
Mr. Suarez
We're
was
going to
saying.
move 200 over from Gonzales because that's the only way that this can be juggled around. The reason then that Jackson comes into it is that we need to take 200 students that are currently at Jackson and move them back because in order to make so that we can actually, I'm saying that wrong, and move the students that are currently going to Milam down into Jackson. And that actually is a good thing because it crosses one of those major thoroughfares with the way that boundary works. Move them down to Jackson, but then, so we end up reducing Milam by 200 students, okay, which is what we need to do. But we juggle students from 2 other schools, and we end up reducing the number of students at Gonzales by a significant amount. And we end up then with you can see the Rayburn utilization at 85, the Milam utilization at 70, at 93, the Jackson at 78. If you go back to Gonzales and Castaneda, Gonzales is still very large at 97% utilization, even with a 100-student addition, and Castaneda up to 72%.
And, go ahead, Mr.
Like Gonzales, you're saying take 400 out, but add 100? I don't know.
No, Gonzales, we reduce 400 students and add 100 capacity. Because we still, even reducing 400 students,
Still will be overcrowded.
the enrollment that's still there is overcrowded for that facility. You're going to be at 176% at that facility. So we're not moving any students into Gonzales on this.
Then I don't understand the 100-student addition. What does that mean?
It's going to give you a
It's a building.
capacity.
A
new
more
building.
classrooms to house the 100 students
Yeah.
that are already there. We're going to take 400 students away, because you're at 1,100 and, what's the enrollment there?
At the projected at Gonzales is 1,112. You are currently at
800.
853 and growing at Gonzales. And so we really need to address that situation. And the way this does that, even by moving 400, and there's no way that we could move more than 400 because you're going to be adjusting boundaries to where Gonzales, the school, isn't going to be in the Gonzales zone. Does that make sense to you? So there was no way I could do more than 400. And it still didn't fit the students that you have there. And so we had to put a 100-student addition, more build. I didn't explain that very well. An addition to house another 100 students.
And
That's what it
with
would
that
take.
thought, we are going to have to recess at this point. It is now 12:01 a.m. We are recessing the 11:30 meeting, workshop meeting of the Board of Trustees at 12:01. And at 12:01, we are now convening the 12 noon meeting, a special meeting of the Board of Trustees of the McAllen Independent School District, which is being held today, Thursday, July the 14th, at 12 p.m. in the boardroom at 2000 North 23rd Street. At this meeting, the board may take discussion, will have discussion and take action on items subject to and listed as the following, and that is the human resource recommendations for school year 2016-2017. So we are now open in that meeting. And unless anybody has any thoughts or questions, we'll now proceed to item 2. The Board of Trustees will recess into closed session pursuant to section 551.071, 551.072, and 551.074 of the Texas Government Code to discuss the following. Item 2A, human resource recommendations for school year 2016-2017. So at 12:02 p.m., the Board of Trustees are now in closed session. How long would this probably take? 5 minutes. 5 minutes, all right. Thank you all. Board meeting of Board of Trustees, the 12 o'clock meeting. We're now reconvened in open session. For the record, no actions or votes were taken in closed session. So we'll now move to item number 4, the approval of human resource recommendations for school year 2016-2017. Dr. Gonzalez.
Yes, sir. Human Resources uses a comprehensive hiring system that screens, evaluates, and ensures all applicants comply with state law requirements. Human Resources is submitting a list of recommendations under separate cover for discussion under closed session, and we are requesting action on this item.
Matters now before the Board of Trustees. What action do you take?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Scarlett. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fodina, that we accept the recommendations as submitted by the administration. Any discussion? Hearing none, proceed to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-0. Do I now have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Fodina, seconded by Mr. Suarez. Any discussion? Hearing none, proceed to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-0. We are now
We'll get contracts out.
at 12:11. The 12 o'clock meeting is adjourned. Now at 12:11, we are reconvening the 11:30 board workshop of the Board of Trustees. And so we were in conversations and discussion regarding facility, maintenance, and operations comprehensive audit. And you now have the floor again.
Great.
Okay,
Thank
so I'm going to continue on here now with this option 1, which again is an option. In no way recommendations, we're not even near recommendations, we're just laying out, here's what they mean for different options, okay? So we've gone through that whole thing with Gonzalez and what that would take, and then the reason that that's a $3 million, even though it scored over 70, it's because of the addition. It's because of doing that 100 student addition, and that's why you see that budget on that one. Hendricks then is, it's got a combined score of 84 and a projected utilization of 84%. It's a regular maintenance without an asterisk, because it's, we're okay. Let's not mess with where we're okay. Houston has a combined score of 68. It does have a projected utilization of 92, and so it does need to have some improvements made to it because of that 68 score. And again, it's building suitability and site, because technology readiness did score over 70 at Houston as well. So you can see we put a budget for that. Okay, let's go to the next page. Jackson was part of that whole issue with Gonzalez, and as I explained earlier, and Milam, and it really would be a renovation because it scored 68, okay? And it would be those 200 students from Milam, which are now really across that thoroughfare and just north of Jackson right now anyways. And so that one's a more palatable boundary adjustment, it would seem to me, with Jackson and Milam. And that would then improve that utilization to 78%, plus it would have improved building condition suitability and site, so that's why that budget is up there at $3 million.
Yeah, from Milam, it's almost east. It's south by southeast from Milam.
But there's a part of the Milam attendance zone that is just north of Jackson.
Wow.
I'm not sure why, unless I'm...
Well, I will tell you that when we moved here, we thought, we're like 4 blocks from Jackson, and we were zoned to go to Milam, even though Jackson was much closer.
Yeah, that's correct. And so that actually, that's why I say, that's a much
Actually
more
makes sense.
palatable, it actually was one that makes sense. You have, Milam is this, you can't see this, it's this green here, but it also extends out here, and then Jackson sits right in here.
Exactly.
So that boundary change makes some sense too.
And I think it was Nolana on the north, and
Yeah.
I want to say Fern south. It's just a little sliver.
Yep.
It's
Okay.
just a matter of if there's kids in that area still.
That is part of the issue. I mean,
Yeah.
our goal is to be as sensible as we can with your natural boundaries
Yeah.
like roads and
Exactly.
creeks and things
Yeah.
like that. But we also will then, now we'll go back and say,
Yeah.
okay, if that option makes sense to you for us to develop further, then we got to go figure out where the kids are.
Where the kids
And
actually
not
are.
only where the kids are now, but where are they going to be by
Where they're going to
2022.
be.
Yeah, so we'll have some of that information as we move forward.
And then the only other one is, is that Navarro fits the regular maintenance, but very underutilized. Perez is score of 88. 90 is like new, and 96%. So we're fine there. Rayburn wasn't involved in that whole boundary adjustments with Gonzales, and it would take some of the students from Gonzales. And then the rest of them from Roosevelt through Sanchez, Seguin, Big Pin, and Wilson are all at that regular maintenance, and with the exception of Sanchez, underutilized. Okay?
And you can see our estimate for elementary school budget is just over, is 11.7.
Almost $12 million to do that option and improve the schools that are scored less than
Less than
70.
70.
That's it?
$11 million.
Wow, okay.
Okay, but remember, that's less than 70. That's
Right.
only touching, so you can see Milam, we're not putting any money into Milam at all, despite the fact that its score is 70, because we're only touching the schools, in this option, we're only touching the schools that scored less than 70.
And the
So
only-
you guys could come back and say to us, no, we want you to go to 75. That's why all these are options, because we need to know what your thinking is on these. You had asked us for options, so
Yeah.
here's one.
Right.
You may decide you don't like it. Ed said some of them we don't like at all, but, okay.
If I
Okay?
may, I remember the last meeting, the number 152 was thrown out.
Yep.
Right.
We're going to show you how that all fits together.
Just
okay?
making sure.
I'll show you how that all comes together here. Because this is the least cost option.
Okay.
The only new construction in this option is a 100 student addition at Gonzales.
Okay.
That's the only, everything else is just improvements, and it's to a score of 80.
Gotcha.
Okay?
And it's
All right.
only the schools that scored less than 70.
And only the schools that scored less than 70. So this is the least expensive
To
option.
get us to 80.
There's another option, right?
Oh, there's a number of them coming.
All right, good.
Okay? The next one is better, just in the
But that
fact,
just looked at the elementaries, it didn't look at junior high.
we're going to get
We'll
there.
get there.
We're going to get there. This is just the elementaries. Promise.
Now that you were going to the second option.
Do you want to see
We
the
wanted to do,
option?
no, let's do, I would really walk through, if it's okay with you, I'd like to walk through the elementaries first and then show the middles and highs. You okay with that? Yeah. Okay?
So this is option 1A, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I guess the reason, so option one, even though it shows only 11 million, that's only for the elementaries.
Right.
Junior
Only
high,
for elementary.
Middle school and high
We're
school will
gonna,
have some
the
costs.
final slide is gonna show you, here's all the options, here's adding middle, elementary, middle, and high, and what the total is for each of the different options.
So
Okay?
let me just see if we're in agreement, and I'm just for time purposes. Is there an option where all schools will be scored, they're all at 80? Because in my eyes, this is just me speaking for myself, I would not be comfortable with making a decision that would put some schools at 70 and some schools at 80. I would want everybody to be on the same playing field. So if I go to school at Garza or if I go to school at Escandon, all of my schools are ranked the same.
Okay, we can do that. We don't have that one right here now, but we can do that for you.
But I have the number.
We can do those numbers easy.
I can pull it up for you and show you what it would cost
Okay.
to bring all the
Okay,
schools
continue.
to 80.
Okay? All right, so the only difference, I'm not going to spend much time on option 1A. And each of the options is going to have an A after it, and the only difference there, well, there's two things, okay, is in that top line. It brings schools up to a score of 90, and it addresses schools that are scored less than 75. So it adds in all of the schools between 70 and 75. So that's going to make it a more expensive option. And it brings everything up to a score of 90, which is like new. every school that's currently less than 75 up to a score of 90. So otherwise, the boundary changes, the which schools, that all stays the same, with the exception on which schools, those that scored between 70 and 75 are now included. So you see like there's some renovation at Garza.
Let me just
Yeah.
say that, Mr. Suarez, your comment about
Yeah.
bringing all the schools to 80 or to 90, if you look at Castaneda on this chart, it has nothing, which means it would stay a 78.
Yeah.
And the rest of the schools that have budget numbers would be moved to a 90.
And that's a fair question. Fair
So we
question,
can
and
show
we
you
can
what the
easily show you
impact of
those
that
numbers,
is.
okay?
Yeah.
But under this scenario that we laid out, this obviously increases the budget significantly because it adds the number of schools and it brings them to 90. Otherwise, things are the same. If you go to the bottom of the next page, that jumps up just for elementary schools, jumps it up to a budget of $43 million.
From 11 to 43.
Yes. Okay? Yeah, significant. All right. I now want to go to elementary school option 2, okay? Because I like it a lot better. Okay? Elementary option 2, again, we start with the bring it to 80s and address schools that are less than 70. But the big difference, the boundary changes aren't bad if you build a new school in the Gonzales area. So if you go down to Gonzales, if we build a new school in that area, then we can leave Gonzales at its current capacity of 631 and leave 552 students there, and it'll be at 87%. Build a new school with a capacity of 600, put 550 students in it, and the utilization would be at 92%. Much better situation, okay? Much better situation for that part of town, okay? And so it's $21 million to build a new elementary school. So that's going to jump the budget up significantly.
That 21 million doesn't include land costs, or includes land costs?
I know Linda ran all those numbers. Do you remember where they came from?
They came from Ruben's estimates with architects and engineers. I don't believe it includes
So
land
it
costs.
probably doesn't include land?
Currently, right now, with the current elementary that is bidding right now, and speaking with that architect, there's a budget set of about 15 million for a brand-new elementary at that point with a capacity of about 750 students.
So we'd be in the ballpark.
So with that type of budget, that would allow monies to even include land along with, whatever is needed.
Yeah, we tried to be all-encompassing in the cost. So I know we included furniture and fixed equipment, and all those kinds of things in there, all the fees. Did that $15 million include the architectural fees and the engineering fees and all of that?
That is separate.
That's just construction costs.
That's construction.
So that's the difference, because we've tried to make this an all-encompassing cost.
That would be the total budget.
The total budget for an elementary school and we're saying for a capacity of 600, not 750. But it does include all costs.
We do
Okay?
own some land around there. We call refer to as the 6th elementary.
Yeah, but y'all predicted growth in that area anyways, right?
Yep. So that makes more sense.
So it means we're not doing the move kids here and then move kids here routine that you had described.
But
earlier.
that property is the city of FAR, but MASD.
That's correct.
That's right.
Number 6 is actually in the city of FAR, but in the McAllen School District.
Bar
It is.
spelled with PH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
thinking
And that
far.
was a
I
concern.
thought you meant far.
Yeah, no, PH.
All right.
And that was a concern in the conversations, as to options in the past, that, for whatever reason, there wasn't a real interest in wanting to put a school in the city of FAR.
Yeah.
Even though the other cities are putting school districts in the city of McAllen.
Right.
Okay. This then still does, so that really makes that whole thing up there in the north much simpler. There still needs to be a boundary adjustment just between Milam and Jackson. Jackson's underutilized right now, Milam is overutilized. We need to adjust boundaries to move 200 students from Milam to Jackson and better utilize both schools. Now, Milam is in better condition, I believe, than Milam scored right at 70. Jackson, it's not a lot different. Jackson at 68, so Jackson did get the renovation as well as the boundary adjustment dollars under this scenario, okay? When we're done here today, we can come back with any adjustments to these that you want. We already have one that we've heard that makes lots of sense for us to lay out for you. You go, oh, you're already at the next one. So all that does is we have the boundary adjustment between Milam and Jackson. It puts the Milam utilization at 93%, which is where it's a much better situation, and it puts the Jackson utilization at 78%, where it's projected to be 58. So that all makes some sense. That comes to $29 million, or $29.5 million.
And the biggest cost there, of course, is that new school.
Sure,
Right.
biggest
There are
cost,
some
that's a
other-
new school.
There are some other adjustments.
But now, option 2A, which is, again, the same option, but it addresses every school with a score of less than 75 and brings them up to 90. So now the numbers are going to get bigger.
Bottom line is-
You're with me now, and the numbers are going to get bigger, and the bottom line becomes $61.6 million to do that.
For elementary schools. So that's a new school in the north to address Gonzales, and moving all the schools that were less than 75 up to 90
Yeah.
across the board,
And that's
and moving the students.
$61 million.
The studies
Okay.
that you're doing, they're projecting growth in that area, which is concerning because enrollment has been decreasing. So are you talking about population growth? Are we taking into consideration the new
In which area? In which area are we projecting it?
Well, all the areas, I mean.
No, there's a lot of them that are projecting decrease over the next 10 years.
Even Gonzales. I mean,
No,
Gonzales is one of the
Gonzales
ones that is growing.
We do show it growing. We show Gonzales growing, but we show an awful lot of them, see, it goes from
I mean, I know there's a lot of
800 to
apartments and stuff going
1,100.
up.
But if you look at Jackson, we're showing going from 762 currently to an enrollment of 502, showing significant decrease at
Those
Jackson.
kids are moving on, and
Yeah.
there's not much growth and redevelopment in that middle section
See,
of the
there's a
city.
number of them that we're showing decrease in, yeah. Sometimes significant, yeah. Okay? All right. So now you have we're on option 2A, which
Ready?
is, you have it up there?
61.
Oh, you've got the second page of it already. Option 2A is the same as option 2, but it addresses the schools that are under 75, and it brings them to 90. That is $61.6 million for the elementary schools only. Okay?
Okay, ready?
All right, yep. All right, all those schools with asterisks, okay? Here's the,
Before you do this, I just want to make sure everyone understands. We've created options based on your request to us.
yeah,
These are not recommendations.
no.
These are not what we're saying you ought to do. These are exploring what could, what might, what maybe. I want to make sure everybody understands when we're all done that we're going to ask you, what further development do you need us to do in order to come back to you with recommendations that make sense to you because you live here and you understand your community and all of that. But these are not recommendations. We're not saying to you, you should do option 1A.
No.
Okay? So
Yeah.
these are possibilities.
Okay.
It's like looking at the world, but not, okay.
So, the three areas where you could combine some things, and you could look at possible consolidations there. First one is Castaneda, Garza, and McAuliffe, okay? And I thought it was important on this to show you that current utilization, because we're projecting some significant decreases in population around those schools over the next 10 years, okay? So we're showing Castaneda is currently at 74, but 10 years from now will be at 46. Garza from 82 to 59, and McAuliffe from 92 to 54, okay?
So now we're looking at 2027, not 2022.
No, this is 2022.
2022.
He
2020.
misspoke.
Did I say 2027?
You said 10 years.
No, I didn't. 2022, I'm
Okay.
5 years.
We love to go 10 years, but that crystal ball gets really murky.
Right.
And so 5 years, we felt like we could be pretty solid on, because we know the birth rate.
And doing consolidations like this, it takes a 5-year process. It really does. It takes a process to go through, okay? But you could adjust the boundary and reassign 150 students from Castaneda to Garza, and take all 473 that are currently at McAuliffe and move them to Castaneda, and eliminate the use of one building. That would eliminate the use of McAuliffe. Now, we say repurpose because we want to get into where are we putting some special programs and what's the site for some other purposes for the district. But you could do that and reduce one elementary school, okay, among those three. The next group of three is Fields, Navarro, and Wilson. okay? And again, those are schools that are showing significant decline. Wilson from current 98% utilization to 59. Navarro from 75 to 43, Fields from 92 to 57, okay? You could adjust those boundaries to either eliminate or repurpose the use of either Navarro or Wilson. I didn't say Fields because it's in too good a shape. You want to keep using that school. It scored an 85 right now, so you don't want to include that in that list. But you could repurpose those zones and eliminate the use as a school, as a regular elementary school, of either Navarro or Wilson, and again, reduce the number of elementary schools by one. Make sense? Now my least favorite one to talk about. Bonham, Escondón, and Roosevelt. You got the same thing going on at those three schools. You got them projected at 48, 35, and 58%. I didn't include Houston in the mix because Houston's not showing that. For whatever reason, it's not showing that, so I didn't include it. So again, you could adjust the boundaries to repurpose the use of either Escondón or Bonham. Didn't say Roosevelt because because of where it is, because the location of it made more sense to keep students there. I received some information about Bonham and about a community that really, that's where they send their kids to school, and they love sending their kids to school there. And I went out and drove around that community, and what this is about first is how do we best meet the needs of kids and families and have a positive experience in the McAllen ISD. So this is a difficult thing to show, but the fact of the matter is you can eliminate the use of one of those facilities. You have the capacity to do that, and that's the facts of the matter there. Okay, that's the elementary schools.
How does that address the issue of McAllen and Gonzalez? Those consolidation, did I miss it? I didn't see anything.
No, those two schools wouldn't be affected by consolidation.
No,
So
we're
they'd
adding.
still be overpopulated?
No, we're building another school.
We're either,
Building another
depending
school.
upon which
Okay, that was
option.
part of that. Okay.
Yeah.
Depending on which option we might explore.
Yeah, that's not an area that you could look at.
We should either build a new
Yeah.
school, make an addition, and make all those moves that we talked about. Those really seemed like the two possibilities, is to either do that cascading movement of kids from one school to the next, to the next, to the next, or build a new elementary school to address that, because that area is currently overcrowded and is going to continue to be overcrowded. These other possible school consolidation options are beyond those ones that we had already talked about for
Okay.
McAllen and Gonzalez.
Now, when you were looking at that possibility of building a school, you were only looking at the land we currently have. Is that correct? That was the equation?
We knew that you had land up there. We don't know that it's in the right place. We don't
That's
know,
what I'm trying to
and
get
we
at.
don't know any of those things. I knew from conversations with Mr. Trevino that you had a parcel of land in that area. Just looking at the map, there's all these swaths of land that don't show any houses and so forth on it. My trouble is I don't have a good enough picture of what exists there. Sometimes there are shopping centers that don't show up as houses, and sometimes there are other hospitals or something like that that don't show up as houses. So it looks like there's other possibilities up there that might be in a better place. If that's an option you want us to explore, we'll dig into it more deeply. But I did know that you had a parcel in that area.
Yeah, when that was purchased, it was all open area,
Yeah.
but now it's become a lot of commercial.
Right. There
Adjacent
is a
to
lot
it.
of commercial
commercial,
and other kinds of use up there. So
Okay.
we'd want to pay attention to that. If, again, it's an option that you want us to dig in.
And so the
look
better
at.
option might be, and I don't know, and I apologize, I haven't gone out and looked at where that site is, and probably should have, but if that's all becoming commercial, you might be better off to sell that property because it's worth more money and buy property in a better location for a school. That might be the best answer on that. Yeah.
Is this by the monitor?
Yes.
Okay.
But if in doing so, again, we're trying to address, and I think it's a very interesting option, frankly. It's less movement, and you
Yeah.
almost let attrition kind of get you there once you
Yeah.
make that initial, and
That's right.
who doesn't want to go to a brand-new school?
That's right.
Right.
At least for the most part. the availability of property for the size that we need
Yeah.
now remaining in that area.
Right,
So that becomes an issue as well.
Okay.
All right,
yes.
food for thought. Thank you.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. So for the middle school and high school, it's much simpler. It's a much simpler situation. We're not.
schools.
There's fewer schools to deal with, and so we have option one for both of them. And so let me walk you through the middle schools first, okay? And again, this is this bring it to 80s, and for a score of less than 70. It's back to that option one, okay? With Brown Middle School, it had a score of 70. When you round it, it's just under, it's 70, but it's actually 69 point something. So we said, yeah, it needs to have a renovation, and to improve all of those areas, because it scored less on building suitability, technology, and site. A renovation of Brown, quite frankly, could, and lots of school districts have done this, could reduce the capacity, and that would be okay because we're only projecting it at 67%. And what that means is that a renovation might be you go in and what's now 3 classroom spaces become 2, because part of the educational suitability problem is the size of the rooms.
And Brown has very small
classrooms and things like that. And so the renovation could very well reduce the capacity, but that can be a good thing. Is what I'm trying to point out. That can raise the suitability score of the building, and so that's why we said that on there. And so that could be a really good thing to happen. And a budget to bring it to 80 is $4 million. Kathy stays right where it is. Am I pronouncing that one right?
Yes.
Kathy.
Kathy.
Okay. De Leon has a score of 78, so it doesn't. This is for you're under 70, and so but we do need to do a boundary adjustment there, and there's where we need to do. Bring students in from both Fossum and Morris. We need to bring in approximately 75 from Fossum, approximately 150 from Morris, and that will bring the utilization of De Leon up to 93%. Okay? The problem with that is that it's going to affect some high school attendance zones. Okay? Yeah, and the superintendent always, when I make that statement, superintendent, because that's a tough one. It's a tough one. But you really can solve the middle school problem by making some boundary adjustments. And in some areas, it even helps the high schools a little bit. Okay? So if you follow through with me. At Fossum, we've got projected utilization just over 100%, so that's why we said make the adjustment and move students to De Leon and move that utilization down. Lincoln, even though it scored 75, its site score was really low. Does that make sense to those of you that really know these buildings? Its site score was just really low. Is there problems with the site, parking, anything like that at Lincoln? Its site score was low. So I went ahead and said we need to address that low site score. If I look back, Lincoln's site score was, I'll find it here.
I mean, it's a solid structure. I mean, you go through it, it's terrazzo floors, huge wide hallways. You almost think it's a high school.
Could do square dance
Yeah.
always.
It was pretty straight across. Its condition was a 78, which is good.
Yeah.
Its suitability was a 75, which isn't bad. Its technology was 75, which is right there. Its site was 63.
And it's right there by STC,
And I
right on
went,
a major thoroughfare.
so I went
on
ahead,
Street.
and maybe we don't need that, but I went ahead and said that we need to address some site improvements there, and just did the budget formula because of the score on site, and said we need to put $500,000 into it. That's not making sense. I'm not seeing,
Not the site, because we have a nice parking lot.
have a nice parking lot and everything there?
It has a nice
Easy
parking
access,
lot,
Right
but
in the middle of the neighborhood.
Good landscaping.
weren't there water issues or
Maybe
something in
flooding?
behind?
Yeah, there's a little,
Well,
It's a low area.
it's a little low area.
I think that.
Maybe that's what
my
caused it to score low.
recollection of-
Maybe that's what
of it.
caused it.
Because this
but
is the site, it's not the building itself. You're
Gotcha,
absolutely
gotcha.
right, Mr.
Yeah.
Saldivar. The building with those terrazzo floors and the building is in decent condition, but there are some site
well, in
issues.
fact, right, if you know, as you can see, and you can see it on the map, there's an open space right beside it.
Right
to
in
the
front
south.
and right behind.
And
It's
the
huge
city
piece
was
of property.
hoping to get a grant to turn that into a holdover of water to flood, as it rains and it floods, to because we did have
Or retention
significant
pond.
rain, and retention pond is really what it is. We had water go into the gymnasium a few years back, and we had to replace the floor there. So I can see where they're saying the site, it's a low area, it's
And
susceptible
the
to flooding.
the city was thinking to put that retention pond out there on Pecan?
Pecan.
Or out behind?
No, pecan.
Pecan and
Oh.
29. And
Yeah.
Because that Pecan
Yeah. 29.
piece is just directly across kitty corner to the college.
Yes.
I kind of like that for another purpose here.
Well, again, when we were discussing the bond, the thought was we would build a structure there, possibly to house the early college and the IB. That was the thought. In fact, that was the only structure we were going to build new, was in that space. The long and the short is that they missed the window to get that grant, so
So-
that's not on the table anymore.
Okay, all right.
Okay. So that's Lincoln. You remember way back at the beginning of this, I said that on option one, it was doing it through boundary adjustments, the least expensive, but there are two places I couldn't make it work. First one was Gonzales at the elementary, where I said we needed an addition for 100 students. Second one is at the middle school at Morris. Couldn't make Morris work by only boundary changes, and because it really got heavily into the effect it would have on the high school attendance boundaries. So I still thought you could do a boundary adjustment of 150 students to De Leon, but that to make Morris work, we need to do an addition to that building for another 200 students. That would put the capacity at 900 and utilization at 94%. So that would make some sense. Keeps much more reasonableness in the feeder patterns. And so that's why we that's why we laid it out that way. So Morris needs that. So that's why that big number there of $8.5 million.
And that's the same kind of addition that we were talking
Yeah.
about at Gonzales. So it's
Gonzales,
a
so-
building that would house 200 students.
200 more students.
Rather than
Okay.
house that 200 students that are already there.
Yeah, and so, and then Travis would be regular maintenance. Now, middle school option 1A, again, is the same thing, but it brings the schools up to a score of 90. It brings them up to the as-new condition, and it changes to those that are scored less than 75 get addressed.
So you can see
Brings
the
the
cost
number up to
difference.
24 million.
13 to 24.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay? All right.
High school.
High schools. High school option 1. Again, bring it up to 80s and address schools that scored less than 70. Okay? McAllen has a combined score of 73, so it wouldn't be addressed under option 1 for its condition, but its projected utilization is 115% total without IB. And so we really need to, we didn't get a handle on how many students are counted at the high schools now that actually are in the IB program.
None.
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 Okay.
I've
Help me
been
with this,
having to
Susan.
work on Ed's tutorial
Yes.
about IB.
Yeah.
The IB program as opposed to early college.
Early college is the one.
Yeah, so the IB kids, we know that the numbers that we have are not including the IB kids, but we don't know what school they would go to, for example, if Lamar didn't exist. We don't know of the 100, of the 300,
Comprehensive high school.
which comprehensive high school they belong to, right? So that 115% utilization is truly the kids who are attending McAllen High. They're not the kids that are going to Lamar or going to early college.
All right, and then the next two then are just the renovations on Memorial and Row. Well, we did the renovation at McAllen. I stay on McAllen. That's the high school where I said we needed to have an addition, and we needed an addition for about 210 students. Puts the capacity at 2,000, kind of arbitrarily took 210 because I think the capacity right now is 1,790. Puts the capacity at 2,000, and it really then makes that so that you're okay. Even it'll reduce that down. I couldn't put in exactly what the utilization percentage is because I didn't know the number of students that are at Lamar. Yeah. Okay. All right. But but it's not that there isn't going to be enough students to take care of that 15% over.
No.
Okay. But at Memorial, that's likely to be the case. It's likely to be that when we adjust that because of the students that are at Lamar, we're going to be right in the range there. So we need renovation at Memorial and It's got to be in the building and suitability. At Rowe, it's building and site, and we'll be at 95%, so we're in good shape there, but we've got some money going into those. Now at the Achieve Early College, where we talked about, we're throwing this out there to see what you think about it, okay? Is that if we did a renovation at Lincoln Middle School that did while you're doing that renovation, that did 115 student addition at Lincoln, we could house both programs there, and it's just right across the street, isn't it?
Yes.
From where that Achieve Early College is now, and we could house both programs there on one site. You could get out of those portables. And if you do it when it's in a renovation, you can architecturally design it so it's a separate entrance and all those kinds of things. Could work. Might not make any sense to you at all. I always look for looks on faces around, and I'm not seeing a lot of, ooh, that makes sense to me kind of thing. But it sure did to us. So hey, I'm getting a shaking head yes from Ruben. There you go. Okay. And at Lamar Academy, we think you need some renovation, and up to 80, and high school option 1A then is up to 90, and so the numbers get quite a bit bigger, okay? You're going to have some questions. I do want to go to the next page so you can see what these numbers look like.
Okay, so we put it all in one place, so
Yeah.
you could say, oh, okay. Remember that we started with the 11 million for elementary, and you were asking us, so that's all? So if we only did option 1 for all 3 levels, it's 71 million. If we did option 1A, which is taking, as you can see,
Up to
taking
90.
the scores up to 90, but only for the schools that scored less than 75, Mr. Suarez's concern has not been addressed here on these
Yeah.
numbers yet, right? That takes it to 160. But that also includes the new school,
Yeah, it includes building a school.
building a new
Yes.
school.
And that's why
Elementary school.
Yeah,
Right.
includes building an elementary school.
And you can see the cost of option
Yeah.
2, and then option 2A, which includes moving them all to 90.
90. So option 2 is the one that we think is a little better option because it does the new elementary school, okay? It does do it meets the needs there at the middle schools and the high schools, but it only brings schools up to a score of 80, and it only addresses those that scored less than 70. The option 2A really is, it addresses the schools that scored less than 75, and it brings them up to a score of 90, so that's the 178 million. When we first looked at this and said, okay, here's what our first thing last time, we said, we're around 150 million. It was bringing them up to the 90, didn't include that. That's just addressing the schools you have now, didn't include the new elementary school. So that's where that 150 million came from. Does that make sense to you? No?
So when you look at option 2A now at 178,
Yeah.
that includes now an elementary
elementary
school,
school,
which the
right.
158 did
Did
not.
not. Yes.
Did not.
Yeah.
So,
And to address Mr. Suarez's concern that there are still going to be buildings that are scoring 70 or 75, right?
Yes.
We can go in and show you.
Not
what-
70. That brings anything that scored less than 75.
Option 2,
Option 2A.
A, right. But we can show you what it would cost
Yeah.
to bring them all up to 80 or bring them all up to 90, because I have the spreadsheet that we
Yeah.
can
Easily do that.
just pull that up if that's of interest to you. So, what we wanted to really understand from you today is your reaction to any of these options, right? None of these are recommendations. These are options based on what we thought we heard from you. We may have missed your targets. We may have missed what you really wanted to get at, or maybe some of these are beginning to pique your curiosity and might make some sense to you. So we want to make sure that we understand whether you do want to get to 80 or whether you want to get to 90, and whether you want that across all the schools, as Mr. Suarez was talking about, whether you like the notion of building a new elementary school in the north, and therefore you want us to explore that a little bit more, whether there are some other options in there. Remember at the very beginning, I showed you the color-coded cut points. As I said at that point, those were arbitrary, but not capricious. we thought about those, and we talked to both your superintendent and Mr. Trevino about those before we created them for you. But maybe there are some other cut points that you would want us to think about before we come back with some options to develop further, or come back with recommendations. And I think my final question is, how soon do you want this? Do you want a final written report with our recommendations? Or do you think you want to do one more round of conversation like this? And are there some other things that you think you want us to do that would help give you some further data, some further input, some further ideas? So that was kind of the things we wanted to spend a little bit of time discussing with you, if you're still good until 1:30. Is that right?
I'm still good, that's all right. You have to leave in 1.
Yeah, so can you continue? That's what I read down. Can you continue the workshop?
No, we're going to continue. Yeah,
You
so-
can?
Yeah, we can continue the workshop.
No, but I'm saying I need to leave at 1. Can you guys stay working?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We appreciate you staying. I know it's a busy
Yes,
schedule. you
do.
know.
So if you have to leave
We
at
do
1,
appreciate it. Are
That's
there-
what I was
Give us
saying,
your thoughts.
Listening to this, I kind of agree with Marco, getting up to the 80. The elementary, I love the idea of a new elementary. The only problem is, to me, it seems like a hard sell, because you're saying, well, you have buildings that you're not even utilizing, they're not even full, why do you need another brand new one? So to me, it seems like, I think it's a good idea, and I see the reasoning behind it. To me, it's a hard pitch to the community. So I like what you had up there, the options about the rezoning. I think we need to start there, so that needs to be included, even with the ones, put them up to 80. That still needs to be part of the conversation.
Okay. So how is the community going to help you get engaged around that conversation? Do you have some thoughts on how to understand whether, it's obviously cheaper to just pick up 200 kids and move them here, and then pick up 200 kids and move them there, but that sometimes causes the community to go, whoa, that isn't what we asked, that isn't really what we want. Have you had some conversations about how to do that, how to
rezone?
To find out whether that's what the community needs you to do?
I think during the whole bond thing, that came up. You have campuses that are way overcrowded. You need to do, why don't you do, I heard it from people who were opposed to the bond saying, why don't you do that first before you go out for a bond? Maybe it's not gonna fix old buildings, but it'll fix some of the overcrowding.
Sure.
But you still have, at the end of the day, you still have 50-year-old buildings with less kids in them. But we have 3, that are way overutilized. So obviously that needs to be part of this conversation.
It does, and I agree with that, and that's why we wanted to lay out that option 1. It will require some boundary changes that are going to be difficult for parents to accept. There's no doubt about that. And it will require some feeder pattern adjustments that will be headaches for you as the district, to say the least, and will be difficult for people to accept.
Well, and I think it came up in another discussion that you have to you have to convince them that where you're going is better or just as good as where you're at.
Right.
And so,
Yeah. Our motto is you don't
so we
move
go
kids
from one
until
50-year-old
you...
building to another 50-year-old building, well then we're okay over there.
Yeah.
It's just, the quality of the education that they're going to receive there. So we have to convince them.
Well, and that needs to be the goal. Goal needs to be what can we,
What's the benefit?
we talk about, buildings and boundaries and zones and moving 100 kids here, 100 kids there. We always have to come back to, what's the best thing for our kids? What's going to best meet the needs of kids in this community? And we got to come back to that all the time.
In the option that you presented on the repurposing of a campus or 2,
Yeah.
is there a way for you to show us the cost savings to the district on a yearly basis from the operation standpoint on a campus, that if you were to repurpose it, what would the approximate savings be by doing that versus?
I hate that question. Yeah, no, the answer is yes. The answer is yes, and it's just that it varies so much from school to school, from district to district. We got pressured into developing a formula for Tucson, Arizona public schools on what are we really saving by, and Kansas City pressured us into it too. Those two places, and so we do have some formulas that we can apply.
And
I'm so comfortable with these numbers I'm giving you because we've tested these ones and tested them and tested them. It's really hard because you don't save any instructional money. You still have the same number of kids. So you're moving the kids and the teachers and the specialists and all of that. You are going to save some money on the heating and lighting of that building. You're not just on all the utilities and the maintenance and all. You're going to save money on that. You're going to spend a little more money on transportation. Okay, so there's all those things that come into play, and it becomes, I'm not trying to, the answer to your question is yes, we can show that. I'm not trying to shy away from that work. The number that we give you, I don't have as much confidence in as I do on the numbers I've given you here. That makes sense? Okay.
The one aspect we haven't really discussed, and it may not be for this venue, is the educational purpose and programs and services that we would utilize our facilities, and looking at it in a different way than a traditional school district has looked at it. For example, if we were to go to creating academies of these elementary schools, especially if we leverage the STEAM program in a very different way than has been traditionally done, then you could decide that this campus is the science academy at the elementary school. And that changes dynamics of busing and lines and all. But the reality is, if you look at the federal program, ESSA, and you're looking at what the state accountability is looking at, they are starting to line up where you're going to have to be much more purposeful and focused and strategic about what education delivery you're providing at a much earlier age than at the high school level. Which
True,
leads to,
and there's some philosophy that the district really is engaged in. Welcome. Has to be engaged in the conversation about, because does the community really want their little kids getting on a bus and going across town just for STEAM, or do they like this neighborhood concept? I mean, it's the whole notion of you lived within visual distance of a school, but you didn't get to go there because the boundary was in between, and those kind of philosophical conversations. Thank you so much. Really they're very important for a school district to have, and for a community to have an opportunity to engage around. I know you.
Now, right now, STEAM isn't all elementary, so I mean, we're not saying.
Right.
But
You've
I
got
will tell you,
science
in the
rooms in
recent
each.
conversations, that idea of having a targeted academy at the elementary level was brought.
Was of interest?
Well, I don't know if it's to the interest, but it was injected into the mind of those of us that were present when that statement was made that I had not thought of.
Sure.
And I love that kind of thing. I think that's exciting. It's exciting for the community and the educators to come around that and talk about what they want to do. Okay. Having said that, that doesn't change these needs. Okay. Your facilities are still in these needs. Where it comes in and where it becomes exciting then is that once you adopt a plan and say, okay, we're putting this amount of money into renovating this school, and pick one that you don't have here, into fixing Washington School, we're gonna spend this amount of money. Now, when you do the planning for that and you write the ed specs for that, you may want to have those conversations and say, this one, we're going to put all this money into the school. This is the right location for our academy program elementary school. So let's get our hands around that, and let's make sure this is, when we do these renovations, it's designed for that purpose. It gives you the opportunity. It kind of almost forces you into having those kind of conversations. And I think that's really good for a school district, good for a community, good for kids. I love that. It doesn't change the need. Doesn't mean you still need to do these renovations.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we came full
Yeah.
circle to that, my concern has always been is that we're talking facilities
Yeah.
we did during that time period, and there was really no conversation about what the educational,
Educational
academic
program.
aspect of what we were trying to do. It really wasn't.
And that's what needs to drive the whole thing.
Exactly. Now, I would think, I stepped out for a minute, so I don't know if that was discussed, but I think to answer an earlier question you asked about what next steps,
Yeah.
I don't know if we need another workshop, see what the consensus may be of those here. I think we're probably at a point where we can start to begin to frame it as options. I would use the term, instead of recommendations, as options. I know you use the word option there, maybe there's another
Yeah.
term. Because this is my thinking. I think we need now to bring in the community, which again, was almost screamed at the top of everybody's lung. When do we get a chance to do this? And when we brought it out, it wasn't really, like several said, this isn't a conversation. You're telling us what you're going to do. We don't have no input. So guess what? I'm going to tell you what my input is. And they did. So before we ever get to that again, I think we have to go out with this information in a way that we are getting now the input from the community. If we do, and if the folks said, yeah, that's a great idea to put in an elementary school, we love that idea, but we don't want it in the city of FAR, even though it's right there across the street, but it's a mind sink.
Yeah.
I think we need to know that. But if the community is saying, yeah, we're okay with that, it makes sense, etc., then we need to know that too. So I'm kind of getting a little winded, but the point is, I think we need to, I don't know when and how this comes into play, is if we do that and then have another workshop, or we do that with what you've given us?
So,
what's your thoughts?
We do this in lots of places, and you're so right. Often there is no opportunity for community input, there's only opportunity for community response, and it falls apart because of that. And so you're not alone in what happened, but I encourage you to think about, could we now take all of this data, and we have mountains of it, could we go out and say, this is what we now know about the schools? Do essentially what we've done with you for your community in various locations, and hold a series of community conversations, focus groups with teachers, focus groups with principals, because those are important staff components in there too. There may be some other focus groups. We really encourage you to think about having focus groups with students as well. High school students are incredibly interested in what's going on.
Actually,
and have been here a lot. Middle school gets a little more interesting, but we could explore that with you. And then hold a series of community either events or opportunities. We've been very successful with some online surveys. We've been even more successful most recently in Kansas City with a text-based set of surveys, because people hate to come out to a community meeting at 7 o'clock at night. They'd rather stay home and sit on their couch and answer some questions using their telephone. So we could offer you an opportunity for a variety of community activities and put off the next board event until we've asked your community. Here's the information we have. What do you think? What are the priorities? What are the issues? How would you want this sorted out? And then come back to you with that, combined with the data and so forth that we have.
Do the overlay.
And does do the overlay.
And then come back with the report.
From our perspective also, I appreciate the fact that you're emphasizing that these are simply just options, possibilities. I appreciate that. But I also appreciate the fact that they're well thought out as far as options that you're recommending. And in looking at, in my time, I've learned that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So I think that options about consolidating schools, options about building schools, there needs to be very specific whys. a set of whys. This is why we believe that doing this in this area, whether it be building a school or consolidating a school, is ultra important. So one thing that we would ask from the administration standpoint, every possible why under the sun with regard to your option, that it be just laid out in clear, plain language so that we can leverage all those whys and then get into the what we're proposing.
You sound like you just been appointed superintendent. You sound different. Sorry.
That makes sense.
It does. I want to, if you don't mind if I...
Right? Because the last time we met, he was kind of like, yeah. Now he's like, hey, I'm giving my opinion. All right.
Well,
yeah, before you get to this, can you go back, and I'm a little slow, I'm not the
No,
smartest guy.
I apologize. You
No,
missed
just the other slide, the one about the utilization, about the three different elementary schools.
Elementary one.
the
I
elementary...
This
couldn't
one.
figure
Oops,
out,
sorry.
I couldn't understand the projected utilization. So you're saying that we're gonna, one of the options is.
In 2022,
Okay,
that's what your district demographer, your enrollment specialist, has said.
without
that
any changes.
Without any changes, that's how utilized each of those buildings will be in
Wow.
2022. Because of the enrollment now and what the
Okay,
enrollment
that
is
makes sense.
projected to be in
That makes sense.
2022.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just,
No,
it's been
that's really important that you
surprised he didn't cut
asked
me off.
that.
I want to come back to what Dr. Gonzalez just said, though, because I agree with you that that's very important. I want to just, bear with me, I want to challenge the word why for a minute, okay? Because I'm sitting here thinking to myself, okay, well, there's some parts of that option one that I'd have a hard time coming up with why you should do that. Because deep down in, I don't necessarily think that you should, okay? So.
That's my point.
Would we be doing?
Anything where I have that
Yeah.
feeling to the.
Yeah, and so would it make sense if in our report, we listed these options and then listed the pros and cons of each of those
That's
options?
cool,
Does
but
that?
if your gut
Yeah.
feel is the why isn't solid enough to sell the what,
Yeah,
we don't want to take it to the community, because what you're telling me already is that there's some inefficiencies within that recommendation, or not that option. And you clearly pointed out, option one wasn't your favorite. Because I saw you kind of get your eyes lit up when you got to option two.
but yeah, because it makes more sense.
So automatically, I was drinking what you were saying
Yeah.
in option two, and I had
Yeah.
already tuned out option one, just on your body
But
language.
I
Same
do
goes
think
true-
it's really important. I mean,
Yeah.
all of Ed's concerns are true. We do have some concerns about option one, but we would be remiss in not bringing option one to you because it addresses one of the biggest problems, which is inefficiency. It moves kids from where they're packed in too much to places where they're not.
And the
And
most
that was really what I
cost-effective
was
way.
hearing from Mr. Esparza,
Right.
is that we need to, why would we build a new school if we have one that's half empty? Well, we can't address that. It will be painful.
But in
And we
that-
need to say to people, we get it, we need to be thoughtful about this, and we can make that happen, but it means moving kids from here to here, here to here, here to here, here to here, here to here. Is that what you want to do?
But in that same option, you talked about potentially consolidating McAuliffe, Wilson,
Yes.
and Bonham.
Yes.
So you're saying, we're going to cut back here, but we're going to build here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we
exactly.
cut down to 17, build back up to 18. We had 20 to begin with.
Yeah.
So, that's logically, that makes sense to
Okay.
me. I can
Yeah.
sell that.
Okay.
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 So when we developed this contract for this work with Ms. Garcia, who was extremely helpful in that process, we had kind of a long list of tasks that the district had initially said they wanted accomplished. But we ended up with a budget. We have a bucket of $7,600, give or take, $7,800, that was not completely allocated. That we said there may be some additional things that you want done. One of the things that Mr. Saldivar asked for last time we were here was just to think about that staffing study of the maintenance facilities and operations department. And you had just gotten the report from HASB?
TASB, yeah,
HASB.
Texas Association of School Boards.
So you had just barely gotten that information. So we could use that remaining additional services budget line in our contract to conduct a staffing study, or we could use it to conduct this community engagement conversation that would enable us to take this data out to the community, get some further input, get some refinement, get some of their thoughts early, because I agree with you. If you ask people after it's a done deal, they're mad.
Right.
So we
Why you
need to
ask
do
them?
it as input rather than reaction to a plan that has been created.
And we like that. I want to add on to what Susan was saying, because you did ask us last time, would we do it for that staffing study? Susan read the entire TASB study from beginning to end. And as much as I'd like to say, well, yeah, we'll take that $7,600 and just do that, I don't think we can give you any more than what you have. I think they did a good job. I think they gave you the information, and so I don't want you to waste your money. I think you already have that information.
I think the board, I would sense the board feels the same.
Yeah, okay, good.
So,
Yeah, because that's what, after us reading it.
I think when we started this path, we weren't fully aware, or at least I wasn't, that the TASB was going to do that to the depth that they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did a nice job for you, because as I said, we read it. So there's no sense in us doing that again for you.
Does anybody see it differently, gentlemen? Okay. And that's that, so that's
Okay.
it. So
Okay,
now
great.
that we've agreed that at least gets us down started, how many and where and whom would we work those details out?
We can work those details out, but I guess it would be helpful for me, as I'm thinking about formulating this with you, do community, large-scale, y'all come community meetings make sense here in McAllen, or should we at least make an offer to do, one in the north and one in the south? When we do those, honestly, I am not a big fan of community meetings where people get their 3 minutes in front of a microphone.
No.
I wouldn't recommend that. Let me grab a prop here that I carry with me, because we have created a process for gathering community input that I'm the only one who ends up with the microphone, because I don't want to listen to people yelling about things. We hand everybody an electronic clicker. We give everybody a chance to vote equally. So 100 people in the room, every person in the room gets a voting device. And we ask a series of questions. Every
See the result on
single
the screen right there.
person says yes, no, up, down, 1 to 5.
TASB's been using those now. It goes a lot faster.
It goes, yeah.
Slide is,
Yeah, they have been, yes, they have been.
Very emotional about
Yeah.
it.
So
I'll
that
get my
way
point across.
we get that information right away. And then typically what we do is, if there's 100 people there, we break them into small groups and say, okay, so 75% of you said this was really important, but what is it about that? Now we want to have a discussion about what is that. And that process enables, enables every person in the room to have an equal voice, but also gives us an opportunity to explore a little bit more in depth. Typically, we would do that along with an online survey so people can answer the exact same set of questions if they're sitting at home in their living room, as if they come out to this meeting at 7 o'clock at night. We can figure out how many and where and what timeline. We really don't recommend holding these during the summertime. People are on vacation or playing Little League or going to soccer games or something. So we probably want to suggest waiting until school at least is back in session, and we begin a series of conversations about what's coming next, if that makes sense to you. And we can think about the kind of focus groups. You have a very active business community. You may want to have a focus group of business leaders or civic leaders, your city and planning folks. We really welcome an opportunity to think with you about who are the folks that we need to invite to the table as conversationalists with us.
Awesome.
I agree.
Everybody agree? There's one element that that has to be, brought into, and that's the in language. I mean,
Yes.
a significant
Yes.
amount of our population,
Sure.
their families, Spanish is their only language.
Absolutely.
Sure. We have a couple of people who work for us who can do direct translation or can lead the whole meeting in Spanish if we,
It doesn't have to be the whole meeting, though.
if we need
It
to.
doesn't have to be the whole meeting.
It may not be unless, let's say, we decide to have two public forums, because I see forums is great.
Okay.
And then focus groups, I see that as another, and I like the online as well. So it gives you 3 opportunities. But it may mean that if you have only 2 forums, one of them, without geographically identifying it, may be very heavy in language, and that one may need to be almost entirely in language.
Okay.
Or maybe we say we're going to have 2, one in English and one in Spanish, and you pick. And we try to keep it close to the center of the community, if not both of them being at the center of the community.
Well,
Or
that's-
we can do both and do the Spanish one in center,
That's true.
English, and then do one in center for just
And
Spanish.
that's
We
exactly
also
the
have a
kind of
district translator.
insight that you
That's it.
have that we'll want to tap,
Oh, there you go.
into.
The headsets, that's
We
true.
have a
Yeah, the
district
district
Perfect.
translator.
interpreter
We have a
that just
bunch
get
of-
headsets on the way in.
Perfect.
The only,
Yeah, that's good.
and that's true. The only concern is when we didn't do that with the core strategic plan group, and to me it was very disappointing because I spent a lot of time translating to 4 or 5 parents that were there that only spoke Spanish, and I kept asking, where are they, and can we, and because we were in the summer, they couldn't get an interpreter, so they came to the second meeting, and I couldn't do both, be involved and translate, and so they didn't come to the 3rd or 4th or 5th, and who knows what we lost, diamonds in the rough,
Yeah.
because
And it feels very disrespectful, and we don't want to do that at all. But we
The
do have.
headphones would've worked, though.
We
it
do
would have
have-
worked if we had somehow.
Well, that's what she's saying, that.
Yeah,
she'll
we'll have
bring
to
her
plan
person.
for those.
Yeah.
We do
Yeah,
have
we
a
could-
staff person who is fluent in Spanish, and she
Yeah.
could conduct the whole meeting
Tony can do it.
in Spanish.
Mr. William.
Yeah, I try to stay at the 35,000, so that's fine, but really, based on what I have seen, the ideal to me would be, because the other group does it, is that they do have the Spanish language, and it's infused.
Absolutely. What we've
And-
often done is split screen. Also, we have a slideshow. This screen is English, this screen is Spanish, and it goes along so that they aren't also having to, because it's complex. It's a lot of data, and it's much more helpful if it's in their own
Super. I like all.
So-
The end result is that we have to, any public engagement in McAllen has to be available in both English and Spanish.
Great.
Okay, you go.
I think that's absolutely a given.
And he wants Italian. What do you get?
I don't have any Italian.
Tony.
I don't have any Italian, but we can probably get the program or something. I don't have any Italian speakers.
Do you know any words in?
Yes, I do.
Oh, but
Mostacciolo.
yeah, never mind, let's not go there.
I've seen The Godfather a couple times.
Okay.
I speak food in many languages, but that's about the extent of it. Please.
Now, you had mentioned early on, when we started today's conversation, that you could get to the recommendation. We are not going to do that after all, are we? For
Sounds
today?
like we're gonna
Not for
bring the
today.
options.
But
Bring the options.
are we getting closer with this 80? I mean, is 80 sort of the target that you're thinking?
I would like to see all schools at 80.
But bring all schools, even if it scored a 79, let's put enough money to
Let's
bring
get
it
it
to
up
an
to
80.
80.
So
And that's why
I
the
like
figure
that.
152 came to mind, because I
Okay, so
remember
do we want to go?
from
shall we go
that
see if I
last
can find
meeting-
it? Oh, it's in the matrix, which I don't have on my.
It's in the matrix, and we're going to have Linda. Linda's going to have to go through and calculate which schools. It would be a little dangerous to do that in 10 minutes, I think.
the 152, was that bringing the schools to 80 or 90%?
90.
That was 90.
That was nice.
See, that was the number that stood out to me, that it was,
That
we
was bringing
could
them to 90.
bring them all up to 90 for
Yeah.
152.
Good.
Can we go to that slide real quick to see where?
The numbers?
Option
one?
1, 1A,
So we can refer
2,
back to
2A.
what Mr.
Oh,
Farina is
this
saying,
one?
where it has all of them down.
Oh, there you go.
So I'm a little bit surprised because again, option 2, take out the school, we should be at 158, right? Based on the original conversation was at 158
What?
would get us to
2A.
90%.
To 90%.
And yet I'm seeing now it as 70%, we're at 178. How did that happen?
No, that's it. That takes us to 90. That 2A takes us to 90%.
But it takes all schools
But
that are
it-
less than 75.
But it takes the
right
schools
now.
that are less than 75.
Gotcha.
So it doesn't do, the 100, when we told you the 150, It was what our program did for bringing every school in the district up to, it was 90, what? Originally, up to 90. It was taking every school in the district up to 90, just that. So even if a school scored 89, it got a little bit of money, not lots, but a little bit of money, okay? And that was the 150. So these are really, we're a little bit comparing apples and oranges, but it shows you the ballpark that we were in. And I really think you can compare that very well with option 2A, which is bringing all schools to 90, but it's those that scored 75 or less. But it also has in some new construction. It has in the new school at the elementary, and it has in an addition at Morris.
And McAllen?
And no addition at Gonzales.
The 100-student addition?
No, because it's option 2A's
right.
got a new school out there.
Right.
But it has the addition at Milam and the addition at
Morris?
at Morris, and the addition at
McAllen
High School.
And the Lincoln site
Oh,
for
when it has the
early
Lincoln
college.
early college in there, which I didn't see anybody think was a
Did
good
y'all
idea.
factor in that possibly they would help us pay for that STC if we did that option?
We did not.
We didn't.
Okay.
But-
Did not.
We're talking about,
It's always
okay,
good.
backing up just a little bit.
Yeah.
It's suggesting that we take the current Achieve Early College High School out of the barracks into an existing
Into a
building.
real building.
Okay.
That was proposed?
That
Yeah.
was proposed here,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing, right?
But our proposal was on the Lincoln site, on that part that's closest to Pecan. It just seemed like that there's so much space out there that you could build a
Oh,
wonderful
it's building.
administrative
See, I interpreted
classroom
it as changing,
space.
repurposing the building that's there.
Blending of the two together.
But you're
Blending the two
suggesting
together.
actually building now.
Building a building
And-
and still having Lincoln.
and still having
early
Lincoln.
college.
Yeah.
Within
But
the
I was
same-
sort of
Yeah.
picturing one on one side of the parking lot, keeping Lincoln on this side of the parking lot and building out front there, which was a wonderful connection
And
just
that's in
across
that
Pecan.
option two, in
Yeah.
addition to,
2A.
so we're talking building two structures,
Yeah.
an Achieve
Yeah.
Early College campus and an elementary school
Yes.
for 178.
It's not bad.
But that's at 70%. If we do go to 80%, that figure's gonna go up.
No,
No, that's at 90%, but only on the buildings that scored less than 75.
But if we now go to only buildings scoring at 80,
If we go to all buildings being at 80, it's going to go up.
Well, no, it's not going to go that high. I don't think it'll go that high. It'll bring this one up a lot, because this one is all buildings at 80, but only those that scored less than 70. So it's the option, it's that option 2 is going to go from 89 up, but it isn't going to go to 178. No, I'm confident of that. She's not, I can see the look on her face.
Yeah,
But-
if you promise not to watch the screen for a minute or two, let me go look, or not?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we
Go
check,
ahead.
before we,
No.
can we check Rowe High School? Does that include the new roof?
No.
And the things that were?
No,
Okay.
no.
Because there was $11 million, I think, that was put in on-site.
We discussed that, but that will not be added on unless the project is completely complete
Okay.
entirely.
Okay.
That's
So-
when they can count it and.
Yeah.
input.
Yeah.
Okay. Probably
Yeah,
that was all I
yeah.
wanted.
But remember, one of the things that we said to you before is, when we're all done, Ruben is going to have our software.
Right.
He's going to have
He
our
can update
entire
it. And he'll be
database
able to
and the
update that
software, and he's going to be able to,
Great.
puts a new roof on this building, he's going to be able to go in and change the roof to new. The technology upgrade happens, he can go in and change the technology up to whatever.
So that could lower the
happens
cost
to
you
be.
need
Right.
for Rowe High School. But boy, we've learned through experience that, and I'm positive that Ruben knows exactly what he's going to do at Rowe High School. But we've learned from experience that when we go out and assess a building, we assess it as we see it that day. Because we hear all the time, well, yeah, but this summer we're going to do this. We hear that all the time. And, I'm
You're
sure
a
it's not
half-glass
true about
empty
Ruben,
guy,
but
aren't you,
not
Doctor?
all the time this summer that gets done.
You're a half glass empty. aren't you?
You trust, but you verify. That's the type of guy he is.
Yeah.
I just,
You dropping military terms there.
That's not a military term. I learned that from Sam.
yeah.
trust but verify.
Okay, so it
It's an
sounds
insurance
like
term.
we're on a timeline to create a plan for community engagement, and with your permission, I'll work with Dr. Gonzalez and Ruben to think about what works
Yeah.
well here in your community, thinking about community forums, maybe 2, maybe more than that, you guys are going to tell us what. an online survey,
Yes.
as well as some focus groups,
Some focus
and I'll work with the two of them, and certainly your input through Dr. Gonzalez to think about who we need to be talking with when we do the focus groups. And we'll plan for after school starts, second week in September or something like that, to do this community engagement, and then come back to the board with that information and the next set of options based on what we've heard today, which is moving all schools to 80, thinking about showing what the cost of the new elementary and this Lincoln, whatever that might end up looking like.
Okay. Where's the elementaries? Y'all know we haven't looked at a location, right? Nothing like that?
No.
They were kind of using it as a reference, since we have the land right now, as number 6.
By the monitor?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that may not be the best.
That may not be the best site.
No,
Yeah.
but just as a reference. I mean, one suggestion, we sell that and then buy somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah. I did know we were talking a specific.
Yeah.
And then the only, and I apologize, I had work commitments, but the only other thing that I'm not familiar with, what are the options as far as consolidating schools besides elementary?
None.
That's it? Okay.
You don't have that opportunity at middle and high.
In the middle schools? Okay.
You don't have that opportunity there.
Not unless you want giant middle schools.
There was an opportunity to move Lincoln to De Leon, for example, and make that the Chief.
Not, well, that is where we're suggesting to put a chief, but not unless you want.
But not
we
in
have
that-
to,
but not getting them out.
We
You're
have to
saying-
fix Morris.
Okay, but you're saying 2 facilities then?
Right.
See, I thought we had enough room, for example, like at De Leon, to move the Lincoln kids there.
We're
And that's it.
moving kids from Morris,
Got it.
And Fossum.
And Fossum.
because you're way over in both of those places.
Yeah, and if we moved the Lincoln kids there,
You don't have any space.
well, yeah, you're going to have a very, it's going to be over the numbers that you're.
Are we doing that through rezoning?
Yeah,
Might as well.
yeah.
Half the community's mad at us, might as well get the other half mad.
But we're going to ask them.
No.
I mean,
I get it.
the rezoning of moving 200 kids from here to here and there to there and there to there
No,
is
3.
an option.
3, Marco.
But
Okay.
may not
I'm
be the
sorry,
best.
I went off. Yeah. I apologize.
election, you give me that.
All right.
It's an inside between Mr. Suarez, I apologize
First
for
of all, I don't
that.
even know you. Second of all,
So how soon are we going to do the next step? What's,
if you were here earlier, you would have known.
that's what I'm talking
The plan now is looking probably September, October at the very latest, to do the forums and the focus groups and the online. I don't know the timing of those, you guys know best. You
We'll work
may
that
not
out
want
with
to do the
Dr.
online at
Gonzalez.
the beginning until you've
Yeah.
had some, at least 2 focus groups, 2 forums, I should say. But you all will work out the logistics, and then probably October, November, I would think.
come back to you.
You'll come back to the board, and that probably, depending on what the superintendent's giving us as feedback, could be either another workshop, or we could be already at a point where we're actually going to be, a recommendation is
Getting
going
the
to come
full set
forward.
of.
Delivering the report?
It could be, depending on what we're hearing from the community, what you're saying,
enough.
what the superintendent's telling us. He
Great.
may say, I have looked at all that, I've listened to all that, I hear all that. This is my recommendation to the Board of Trustees. We invite you all in, present it. He says, this is what I recommend, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Great.
or 10. Whatever we get to is an option, and the board makes a decision.
Mr. President, I want to address the question with you because the lady from the newspaper, I think we need to get this information out, so I'm going to preface that. And one way is using our media. She wanted to be here, but she just called me and said, is the person, is there somebody from her newspaper? I don't see it. So she said, if not, I'd like to get with somebody to do the story. Obviously, you, Dr. Gonzalez, Ruben, but I also like to include them as well,
Most
too.
definitely.
And I guess I want to bring it up to the rest of the board, so how you see what their thoughts are. But I think it's imperative
No doubt.
that we share this information and be as transparent, and I don't, that we're looking at all this. I just want to see what your thoughts are.
I totally agree with you, Mr. Romano. I think you're right. I think we're at that point. I think there was a little bit of anxiety and apprehension in that first, especially when we saw the figure that we saw, the 158, and what we know
Right.
was being asked, without it having some clarity of purpose and in where direction. But I think we're closer now, and now we're actually talking about taking this out. So I totally agree with you. I don't know if you want to arrange that or share that to make them available either by phone or in person.
She asked, and the only reason she called me, and I reminded her that I'm not board president, and I said I would tell you, so she would reach out to you, and that way you can coordinate, with Dr. Gonzalez, phone numbers or what have you, but I like to include them. The other thing is, too, I'd like to have them do this presentation for not only when we come in and do the community, but for our business community. Come in and just open it up to everybody and just say, hey, we invite you to come in and walk them through this process. I think we're at that level where we just need to be as transparent and get their feedback as well, too, because business-wise, it makes sense. They might even come back and tell us, you know what, I think you need to go to 90%, and these are the reasons why.
I tell you, you're absolutely correct. And I think that's where the focus groups would be, and one of the focus groups could be the MEDF, would definitely be the chamber, maybe the McAllen Education Foundation and their group of folks that are associated with them, just to start Futuro McAllen.
Well, maybe we invite all of them to our facility, to the maintenance department. He's got a pretty decent-sized conference room over there that we could probably accommodate majority of them and just do one, knock them out once.
We can do it, yeah. We can do it, a combination of that.
That's a nice facility over there. Yeah, it is.
We can do a combination of both,
Absolutely.
So we'll work with Dr. Gonzalez and Ruben to figure out when and who. Some of those things could happen before school starts, but for families, we really have found that if you do it in the summertime, you're talking to empty chairs.
Yes.
But to Mr. Alvarado's point, and what you just said, we probably could start sooner than later with the chamber and all of this.
And a lot of what they're going to want to know is all of the data that we gave you,
Yeah,
not today, but the last time.
Yes.
Yes,
What
they
were
are.
those assessments of schools? Who did those, and what did you look at, and what did that tell
I
you?
agree.
And I think we do it before, actually, the focus groups, just to kind of, get that information out there, and then so when the focus groups come and people start pushing back, hey, they know what we're talking about. It's our key opinion, in the community, right, that we can educate. So even if they come in before that time period, I'd be in favor, even if I don't know the logistics, who pays for it, what we pay for it, I'm willing to do it. I think it's that critical, because that we get this information out there.
We need to, we have this $7,000 figure that's sitting out there. We need to, Susan needs to work here and say, here's what we can do for that. If you want more, here's what it's going to take.
Fair enough.
Okay?
Dr. G, if we can, if we can work on that portion of the business community, have a plan, I'd like to have that sooner than later.
Totally agree. I think we all agree on that point.
Yeah, I would even tell you that the monitor or editor, if she wanted a one-on-one meeting with them, I would absolutely encourage it, because the more, and I can help coordinate that, or one of us can, because the more that we get out there.
I have her number also.
Okay.
I agree.
In fact, if, I don't know when you plan to leave, is it today or tomorrow, but, maybe that could happen before.
Yep.
We're happy to talk with her over the phone
Phone
or
or
in
however it
person,
can work
whatever
out.
works best. I am leaving this afternoon, so
No
it can't
problem.
be tomorrow
The
morning.
next
but-
time, the next
but-
time.
Yeah, conference call works great, because we can share the slides and all of that. We did not print this information for you today. We're always you tell us what you want, and we're happy.
I want to disseminate it
give
to the
it.
Board of Trustees now.
Okay.
I think we're at that point. We're going to have to pull the trigger. It's going to go out anyway.
I agree.
And the board needs to start to be up, from getting familiar with it, becoming really knowledgeable, asking the questions. Because when we start rolling it out, as early as it going into a newspaper article this Sunday, it could happen that fast. The board needs to see it. And I like the other information as well.
We'll send you both.
Send you both.
the two PowerPoints, so you'll
These
have
two
all the
presentations.
data.
Yeah.
And I would really encourage you and invite you to, Dr. Gonzalez knows how to reach me by both email and phone. I'm happy to respond if the board members have questions and say, walk me through this again. Tell me again how you got to this number, or what's behind this number, or what the issues are. Because I think you're right, Mr. Salvar. It's really important that you feel comfortable being able to explain what that is and why it is and what it means.
Okay.
Very good. Any other information, gentlemen? Mr. Trevino, I didn't mean to cut you out earlier. Were you going to mention anything else?
What Mr. Alvarado was saying, but those meetings would take place before the actual final report is complete.
Yes,
to
I think so.
Yes.
tweak it
that's what I'm
or
hearing.
Yes.
Modify it before the actual final report is presented.
Mr. Trevino, I think we made a mistake in the past, not just with the bond or some other situations where we give them the final report and say, this is, what do you think? And if I'm sitting there in the audience, I'm like, you already made up your mind, I'm not included in this. So I think it's imperative that we get them on early so they can feel a part of it. So when the final report comes in, there's more ownership. It's not us telling them, but we're saying, hey, this is our options, this is what we're looking at. Give us your feedback now, and we might.
Input.
Like, I hadn't really, that building them a new school over there, I can see both sides of it just now, and the community might actually embrace it. Because they don't, if we get rid of Gonzalez too, oh my. And if we have to, we have to. Rezone it, but let the community know and say, hey, this is where we're at, you gotta help us.
We can build a new school, but we can't replicate what's happening at Gonzalez.
That's what I was trying to get to earlier with
That's
the
my thing.
education.
You can build a brand-new, beautiful, state-of-the-art.
I think Bettis is there though, Mr. Fudina. It's getting there. It's getting there.
It's getting there, but Gonzalez is on a different level. And it starts because of Mrs. Hernandez and the teachers that she has groomed with her to get it to that level.
But I think we have some schools like Bettis.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't want to disparage the other schools, but I think
I understand.
we could build a brand-new, beautiful school that's got all the bells and whistles. Yeah, we could name it that if you like.
Fudina Elementary.
But I just don't know,
I understand. Good point. Good point.
It's
I
hard
totally
to
agree
replicate.
with, I totally agree with it. And that's one of the things in the past that troubled me, this notion that, if you build it, people will come. That's a field of dreams. That's not reality in the real world. You can build one right down the street.
Unless we're talking about scoreboards.
Yeah, unless we're talking about, but if it's not, generational, because my other kids went there, or I might have gone there, or I'm right there, just the fact we build it is not going to be
Well,
sufficient.
I think though
But it's harder
that's
to move kids.
right.
To take kids out of Gonzalez and move them to someplace else is harder than moving them to a new school.
Well, the perfect and closest example that we have is Donna. You have Donna High School, which is the Redskins, and is really overcrowded. And 3 miles north, they build a
State of the art, man.
state-of-the-art palace. This is
awesome.
comparable to the Greek Parthenon. And kids don't want to go there because they're not going to be Redskins. It's that engraved in the community that,
I know.
I'm not going to be a Redskin, I'm going to be a Chief. I don't want to be a Chief, I want to be a Redskin. So, it takes quite a while for that to get past that, and that's.
I get it.
But I think our superintendent can help us with that though, because there's a lot of misconception that Gonzalez, their test scores are, and if you look at numbers, they are doing the best. But what I mentioned, Bettis, for example, is they're right there.
Right. Seguin was
So
right there as well.
a lot of schools are right there. So what it is, we have to do a better job if you ask someone why they go to Gonzalez, well, it's a great school. Well, did you know that Bettis also has good test scores and it's nicer facility? Same with their high schools. I get asked this all the time. Your kids going to Roe? Yeah, the test scores are outstanding. They're prepared. My oldest is ready to go to college. She got a great education at Roe, and where you can at McAllen Memorial. Sometimes I think we have to do a better job of promoting
our own schools.
So we just let Gonzalez is a great school because they hear it over and over anecdotally. But if you look at the numbers, we have schools that are just right there. So if we do build one, I think it's how we market it. How we.
Completely agree.
I think as we continue this conversation, we have to be prepared, and I know you will be, that we have to bring that academic.
Educational.
Oh, yeah, we have to, as to if you build it, who's going to be the principal? Now, you may not be prepared to say who it is, but you're going to say, this is how we're going to go about, or what teachers are going to go there. Well, if we do, this is how we've done it in the past, and we take a little bit from each one and we build up capacity. I think we have to be prepared to
We did that, and that's a great point, Sam, because I think with Gonzalez, when Bettis, we actually named the Bettis principal before, and she did a lot of recruiting at Gonzalez, so the parents can meet her and when the adjustment
Has
doctor,
to
am
be
I
involved in the
speaking?
planning
I
of the
remember
school.
something like that.
That's exactly right.
We did that. We hired them early, so their way that relationship, could be fortified, so anyway.
All right.
Great.
Is there anything else
Lots
we
of
need to
good work.
discuss? We've had a long,
This has been
We started off saying
very
we had a lot to
helpful.
share with you today.
yeah, you did.
Thank you for your time.
Well, thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much.
So we're all done, no further
Thank you very
questions. I need a
much.
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Suarez has moved to adjourn. Do I have a second?
You have a second, sir.
Second by Mr. Alvarado. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-0. And at 1:38, we adjourn.
Should be first to say aye.
Great.
Why am I-